let's explore a concept you are undoubtedly familiar with, the phenomenon widely recognized as the butterfly effect, or in scientific circles, chaos theory. At its core, it proposes a deceptively straightforward premise that a microscopic alteration in the fabric of space and time will irrevocably transform every single event that transpires afterward. While the foundational thought is exceptionally basic, the ramifications it holds for our reality are absolutely staggering. However, there is a profound secret surrounding this theory that is rarely discussed. It extends far beyond poetic metaphors regarding fragile insects generating catastrophic storms. In truth, chaos theory serves as the crucial, missing puzzle piece necessary to decode a scientific enigma that has utterly baffled brilliant physicists, deep-thinking philosophers, and eager learners for well over 100 years. The realm of quantum mechanics. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you executed every step flawlessly, yet the outcome remained wildly unpredictable? Do not view this as a flaw in your own judgment. It is, quite simply, the fundamental nature of physics. The moment you truly grasp the mechanics behind this unpredictability, you will experience a dual awakening. First, the quantum world will immediately shed its reputation for being incomprehensibly weird. Second, on your entire perspective on every intricate network in your existence, from interpersonal dynamics and financial economies to meteorological patterns, and your personal trajectory will be permanently and radically transformed. The general consensus dictates that quantum physics is incredibly perplexing merely because it deals with the microscopic, subatomic layer of existence. Yet, the genuine reason it appears so impenetrable is that our educational approach skipped the vital groundwork. We were presented with the final, bewildering answers without ever walking the path that naturally arrives at those conclusions. Chaos theory represents that very pathway. Once you embark on this intellectual journey, quantum mechanics ceases to be a random assortment of absurd phenomena demanding blind belief. Instead, it evolves into a perfectly rational, inevitable destination that resonates with your deepest intuition. To unravel this mystery, we must begin with the historical thread that weaves all these concepts together. Back in the year 1687, Sir Isaac Newton bestowed upon civilization a framework that felt akin to acquiring a magical ability. His physical laws were so astonishingly exact that the scientific community developed a deep-seated conviction. The future, theoretically, could be calculated with absolute perfection. The prevailing dogma suggested that if you could map out the precise location and momentum of every single atom at this exact second, you would possess the power to forecast every future occurrence until the end of time. Whether it was an impending hurricane, a cosmic impact, or a simple human choice, everything was predetermined. The cosmos was viewed as a flawless, relentlessly ticking clockwork machine. This deterministic mindset dominated the world for nearly 200 years. That illusion was finally shattered by a brilliant mathematician, Henri Poincaré, when he attempted to unravel what appeared to be a relatively straightforward puzzle, calculating the gravitational pull between three celestial objects orbiting in space. He wasn't dealing with a simple pair of objects. The introduction of a third completely shifted the paradigm. Poincaré anticipated discovering a neat, elegant mathematical formula. Instead, his revelations violently shattered the illusion of the predictable universe. The chaotic reality he exposed hidden within that broken machinery would ultimately demystify quantum physics, proving it isn't an anomaly. Rather, it is simply the most profound manifestation of a truth that has governed our reality since the dawn of time. That foundational truth is precisely what we are exploring today. As it turned out, the infamous three-body problem possessed no tidy, definitive answer. This failure wasn't due to a lack of intellect on Poincaré's part. It was because a perfect mathematical solution is fundamentally non-existent. Attempting to chart the trajectories of three separate masses heavily influencing one another via gravity cannot be condensed into a basic algebraic expression. Their dynamic relationships are excessively entangled, incredibly reliant on one another, and far too vulnerable to their starting states to ever be simplified into an equation that yields a flawless prediction. This monumental realization marked the initial fracture in Newton's perfectly synchronized mechanical universe. Through this dilemma, Poincaré uncovered a profound principle that humanity had never managed to explicitly define. He demonstrated that within specific frameworks, microscopic deviations at the very beginning will inevitably spawn monstrously divergent finales. We are not talking about slight, proportional variations here. We are talking about entirely foreign, unforeseeable, and irreversible transformations. Imagine setting up two entirely identical environments governed by the exact same physical rules and energetic forces. The singular distinction is that one setup has a solitary atom positioned a mere fraction of a millimeter off-center. If this were a straightforward, linear setup, the final results would shift in a predictable, measured manner. However, within a chaotic framework, once the processes run their course, those two initially identical environments will become completely unrecognizable from one another. That imperceptible deviation at the starting block compounds and multiplies across countless complex interactions until any trace of their initial resemblance vanishes into the void. In mathematics, this principle is formally known as sensitive dependence on initial conditions, the absolute core engine driving the butterfly effect. It is crucial to understand that the insect itself does not conjure a violent storm out of thin air. Rather, our global weather patterns operate as highly volatile structures, where the subtle displacement of air from a fluttering wing acts as the tipping point, dictating whether meteorological conditions spiral into a destructive vortex or remain entirely calm. The insect possesses no inherent power. It is the atmospheric environment itself that is incredibly fragile and highly responsive. When scientists finally began to question exactly how many natural phenomena operate under these unpredictable rules, the answer was staggering. Virtually every captivating and complex system on Earth, meteorological shifts, global financial networks, biological habitats, and even the neural pathways in our own minds are all governed by this volatility. Only highly controlled, human-made, or overly simplistic setups bypass this rule. The genuine, unadulterated state of existence is deeply rooted in unpredictability. On a cosmic scale, the grand universe perfectly mirrors this behavior. Every single day, astronomers estimate that millions of celestial bodies violently ignite into existence, while countless others aggressively burn out and collapse. This grand cosmic ballet is the ultimate manifestation of pure, unbridled unpredictability operating on every conceivable level. Therefore, what we label as chaos is, in reality, simply the standard operating procedure of the cosmos. Interestingly, the visionary who formalized this abstract concept and gave it a tangible framework was entirely outside the realm of theoretical mathematics. Instead, he studied the skies as a meteorologist. His name was Edward Lorenz. Back in the year 1961, Lorenz was actively running a digital model designed to forecast atmospheric shifts. During his research, he decided to double-check a specific segment of his simulated data. Rather than forcing the machine to calculate everything from the absolute starting point, he simply inputted a set of numbers from the midpoint of a prior calculation, allowing the software to resume its atmospheric projections from that halfway marker. To his absolute astonishment, the finalized projections diverged wildly from his initial trial. Perplexed, Lorenz rigorously reviewed his mathematical formulas, but they were perfectly identical. He scrutinized the hardware, confirming the computer was functioning without a single glitch. Ultimately, he uncovered the sole discrepancy. The starting figures he had manually typed in were abbreviated. He had rounded them down to 3 decimal digits, whereas the machine's internal processing relied on a precision of 6 decimal digits. He had essentially swapped 0.506127 for 0.506. That minuscule, seemingly insignificant sliver of numerical variation when processed through thousands upon thousands of cyclical computations birthed an entirely unrecognizable climatic outcome. The digital model hadn't malfunctioned. Rather, it inadvertently exposed a profound foundational truth regarding the very nature of atmospheric science. Forecasting meteorological events isn't merely challenging due to inferior technology or sluggish processing speeds. It is inherently unpredictable because our atmosphere operates as a purely chaotic engine. The level of exactness demanded to accurately map out long-range forecasts far surpasses any metric humanity could ever physically record. This vast chasm separating the data we possess regarding starting states from the data we actually require is not a technological hurdle waiting for a clever engineer. It represents an absolute, immovable boundary of physics, the ignored revolution. When Lorentz introduced these groundbreaking findings to the world in 1963, they were met with deafening silence. As a weather researcher submitting his work to a niche climatology publication, the monumental gravity of his discovery flew entirely under the radar, far exceeding the boundaries of his specific discipline. It required a full 10 years for the broader scientific community to awaken to the reality of his paper. This was not a minor revelation concerning rain clouds. It was a devastating strike against the very architecture of foresight. A lone researcher, simply investigating a minor irregularity on a printed sheet of data, had accidentally stumbled upon the ultimate boundary, restricting what any conscious mind can definitively foresee about tomorrow. If this revelation is completely rewiring your perspective on uncertainty, take a moment to leave a comment below with the word chaos. Brace yourself, because we are only just approaching the truly mind-bending quantum aspect of this journey, the deterministic illusion. Let us clarify a massive misconception. The doctrine of chaos does not dictate that the universe is governed by sheer randomness. That is a widely held fallacy, and it entirely contradicts the theory's actual premise. In truth, chaotic frameworks are strictly deterministic. They are bound by rigorous, unwavering mathematical laws. If you could hypothetically provide an absolutely flawless initial state, the final result would be 100% preordained. There is absolutely zero randomness embedded within the math. The chaos we observe stems from one unavoidable barrier. Achieving pristine, infinite exactness in those starting variables is a physical impossibility. To flawlessly project the distant future of a volatile environment, you would require a starting measurement that extends into infinity. Our universe actively prohibits such perfection, crossing the threshold from chaos to quantum. When you zoom down to the most microscopic layers of existence, the mere process of observing or calculating an object fundamentally disrupts the very object under scrutiny. This brings us directly to the threshold where the classical chaos paradigm bleeds into the enigmatic realm of quantum mechanics. Traditionally, chaos reigns supreme on a macro-level stage. It effectively maps out giant, tangible networks such as ocean currents, wildlife demographics, global finance, and shifting climates. These are constructs composed of elements massive enough that bizarre subatomic quirks play no significant role. Nevertheless, classical unpredictability laid the groundwork for a structural limitation on foresight that quantum physics pushes to its absolute extreme. While macro-level chaos points out that our lack of flawless measuring equipment prevents accurate forecasting, the quantum boundary plunges much deeper. At the subatomic layer, the issue is not our faulty instruments. The reality is that the particle itself simply does not possess a definitive, locked-in state waiting to be analyzed. The ambiguity does not lie within our methodology. The ambiguity is woven into the very fabric of the entity. Consider classical unpredictability as our necessary training wheels. It forced humanity to acknowledge that structures operating strictly by the rules can still defy all practical prediction. Following that, quantum theory arrived to teach us that, at the bedrock of reality, the cosmos isn't even following a deterministic script. This foundational instability is not a byproduct of human stupidity or lack of knowledge. It is a core architectural feature of existence, navigating the unknown. Before we cross the final threshold connecting these two profound scientific paradigms, consider this singular parallel. Both of these frameworks illustrate entities undergoing profound metamorphoses. They highlight moments where established, reliable routines disintegrate, making way for unprecedented novelties to surface. They prove that microscopic, perfectly timed shifts can yield monumental results that sheer, brute force at the incorrect time could never achieve. Remarkably, this mirrors the exact internal sensation of undergoing a massive, genuine life transformation. If you currently sense that you are navigating a massive personal pivot, or if your reality feels exceptionally turbulent and challenging right now, I have created something specifically designed for your situation. I developed the Quantum Transition Field Guide to serve as an anchor during these exact periods of upheaval. It is a comprehensive 8-9-page manual dissecting the intricate stages of genuine personal evolution. It outlines exactly how each phase manifests physically and emotionally, providing 5 distinct psychological protocols and a complete, step-by-step 30-day roadmap to guide you through the chaos, securing your guide and returning to the science. For those who absorb information better through listening, an audio format of this material is also readily accessible. Do not miss this opportunity to take control of your personal evolution. Secure your copy of the Quantum Transition Manual today. You can find links to both formats directly in the description below. Now, let us dive back into the physics. The upcoming segment is the exact revelation that the title of this video promised, and it changes our entire perspective. The quantum conundrum. Quantum mechanics stands as the most rigorously tested and flawlessly validated framework in the entire history of scientific pursuit. Its mathematical forecasts are pinpoint accurate down to the 10th decimal place. Yet, despite this perfection, for over 100 years, the brilliant minds utilizing these formulas have struggled profoundly to articulate what the math actually signifies about reality. They know perfectly well what the equations predict, but they cannot agree on what it fundamentally means. The orthodox scientific explanation proposes that subatomic elements hover in a bizarre state known as superposition prior to any observation, meaning all potential realities and positions exist simultaneously. Merely observing or measuring the entity supposedly forces this multitude of overlapping possibilities to collapse into one definitive, singular reality. But this sparks an endless cascade of questions. What exactly qualifies as an observation? What physical mechanism triggers this sudden collapse? Why does the universe randomly select one specific outcome while discarding the rest? This exact dilemma has birthed a massive spectrum of philosophical arguments and theoretical models, generating more fierce debate than almost any other topic in modern physics. We see the Copenhagen interpretation, the many worlds theory, and pilot wave dynamics all desperately attempting to decode the narrative hidden within the numbers. Chaos as the Rosetta Stone. This is precisely where chaos theory steps in, providing a crucial puzzle piece that most quantum interpretations completely overlook. It offers a macro-scale parallel that makes the subatomic weirdness far easier to grasp intuitively, without watering down the underlying science. Within a classical chaotic framework, the final destination is technically predetermined by the rules, yet it remains entirely unpredictable in reality. This happens because the environment is wildly reactive to initial, microscopic variables that we are simply incapable of measuring with perfect exactness. The predetermined path genuinely exists, but it remains permanently hidden from us. We cannot forecast the future, not because the universe's rules are randomly changing, but because the vital information required to run the calculations is strictly off-limits. Quantum physics pushes this limitation to its absolute extreme. In the quantum realm, the lack of data isn't merely a practical, technological shortcoming. It is a foundational law of nature. The renowned Heisenberg uncertainty principle doesn't just highlight the flaws in our laboratory equipment. It defines the actual boundaries of what characteristics a particle is even allowed to possess at any given instant. You cannot pinpoint both the exact location and the precise momentum of an entity simultaneously, simply because the entity itself refuses to hold exact metrics for both at the same time. The beautiful volatility of reality. This is exactly why grasping chaos theory unlocks the quantum puzzle. Classical unpredictability instilled in us the profound realization that a framework can operate strictly by the rules while remaining fiercely unpredictable. It proved that a system being determined is not synonymous with it being predictable. It showed that just because the foundational laws lack randomness, it does not guarantee we hold the power of prophecy. Armed with this perspective, the quantum realm sheds its reputation for absurdity. It may not be simple, but it ceases to be arbitrary. The cosmos does not roll dice at its foundation. Instead, it possesses an extreme hypersensitivity akin to classical chaos, but embedded at a depth far beneath anything classical mechanics can touch. Our experiences with macro chaos primed our minds to finally swallow this truth. It demonstrated on a human level that highly structured systems can defy all foresight. Quantum mechanics simply mirrors this exact phenomenon at the very bedrock of existence. The strangeness isn't a glitch. It is the natural evolutionary peak of these principles. Chaos theory illuminates that quantum dynamics constantly generate beautiful, unbridled unpredictability across the cosmos at every single second and on every conceivable scale. If you observe closely, there is an undeniable majesty within this volatility. At its core, quantum reality is nothing but a magnificent choreography of pure chaos, a story of quantum consciousness. Let us pivot for a moment to highlight a remarkable message from our community, as it beautifully bridges our scientific exploration with the human experience. A viewer recently shared this powerful reflection that I feel compelled to read. I listen to this material daily, long before quantum became a trendy buzzword. Following a transformative 6-month journey through India and my return to Los Angeles, I felt an undeniable calling to launch Quantum International Productions. The pieces just fit together naturally, and the branding materialized effortlessly. This happened back in 1981. I hosted my own broadcasting program for over a decade, engaging with pop culture icons, athletes, and legendary healers. I embarked on profound inner explorations of consciousness and learned countless restorative techniques directly from the field. I was instructed by guides to commit to a daily mirror meditation practice. However, I carried a heavy burden of feeling like a failure because I couldn't maintain it consistently every single day. I was even told I possessed the energetic longevity to live for centuries. Stumbling upon this teaching has finally validated that I embody quantum consciousness and, more importantly, that I never failed. Thank you, whoever is behind this message. My deepest gratitude. I look forward to serving the world to the best of my abilities with your ongoing insights. What this individual narrated, without explicitly using the scientific terminology, is the exact life cycle of a volatile, chaotic framework. Back in 1981, they experienced a highly sensitive initial condition, a sudden burst of profound lucidity originating from an unknown source that defied logical explanation. That tiny, potent seed cascaded into decades of relentless exploration, yielding phases where they felt deeply aligned, followed by periods of profound alienation from their original spark. Their journey was never a straight arrow. It looped, backtracked, and often felt, from their own subjective viewpoint, like a barren wasteland of personal defeat. However, chaotic dynamics never travel in convenient, straightforward lines. They twist, they branch out, and they inevitably navigate through prolonged eras of apparent anarchy, long before the grand, cohesive pattern finally reveals itself. There is an ancient proverb stating that the divine writes straight using crooked lines, and it perfectly encapsulates this phenomenon. What this viewer interpreted as a failure was simply the system executing its natural chaotic protocol, wading through the necessary turbulence that always precedes higher organization. The insights they found in this content weren't novel concepts. Rather, they provided the missing vocabulary that suddenly decoded the complex orbit they had been traveling all along. This individual did not fail. They were simply tumbling through a volatile dynamic that was consistently progressing toward a specific destination, but they lacked the necessary cartography to understand what that turbulent journey looks like from the eye of the storm. This brings me back to a crucial reminder. If you are currently engulfed in the turbulent winds of your own chaotic transition and are desperately seeking a compass, please do not overlook the comprehensive guide I have linked in the description below. Let's be honest, every single one of us must navigate these disruptive epochs of transformation repeatedly throughout our existence. If this narrative strikes a chord with your own personal journey, I invite you to share your story in the comments section. Simply acknowledging and naming your own chaotic spiral often radically transforms how you perceive it moving forward. Internalizing this paradigm does far more than just rewrite your comprehension of physics. It fundamentally rewires how you interact with your own daily existence. The antiquated, Newtonian bias that the majority of humanity still blindly clings to the belief that your outputs will always perfectly mirror your inputs, that massive achievements strictly demand exhausting, monumental exertion, and that blunt force combined with rigid precision is the only way to manifest progress is profoundly flawed. That mindset is completely incompatible with the networks that actually dictate our reality. Romantic partnerships, artistic ingenuity, physical vitality, and complex strategic choices, none of these are linear. They are exquisitely sensitive, chaotic webs. Within these highly responsive networks, a microscopic adjustment made at precisely the exact moment, in the correct energetic node, will manifest miracles that no amount of brute, exhausted labor could ever hope to replicate. The secret isn't the metaphorical butterfly itself. The secret lies in the flawless timing of the flap. Stepping down into the subatomic, quantum arena, this truth gains an even deeper, more radical dimension. The person watching the experiment is never truly isolated from the experiment itself. The energy, intention, and perspective you carry into any given scenario actively co-author the reality that materializes from it. Tomorrow is genuinely unwritten. Yet, this boundless openness should never be mistaken for random anarchy. It is the manifestation of a supreme, infinitely more sophisticated order than Newton's rigid clockwork ever dared to imagine. It is easy to twist this narrative into a bleak, nihilistic corner. If tomorrow is fundamentally unknowable, why bother exerting any effort or making deliberate choices? But that cynical interpretation fundamentally misreads the entire message. A pre-programmed, Newtonian reality, where every consequence was locked in stone billions of years before you took your first breath, would be the ultimate existential prison. In stark contrast, the marriage of chaotic dynamics and quantum theory reveals a cosmos that is vibrantly, beautifully alive and intensely listening. Your deliberate participation literally alters the menu of what becomes possible. This isn't about imposing dictatorial control over your destiny. It is about recognizing that reality is incredibly malleable and eager to respond to highly intentional, pinpointed engagements. Perhaps the ultimate master key isn't the theory of chaos itself. Perhaps the master key is simply you. Consider the history we just explored. Henri Poincaré wasn't hunting for the ultimate boundaries of human prophecy. He was merely trying to untangle a frustrating algebraic riddle. Edward Lorenz was just trying to figure out why his printed numbers didn't match. The monumental epiphanies that revolutionized our entire comprehension of the cosmos manifested through the precise, delicate sensitivity that chaos theory itself defines. The legendary butterfly effect should never be viewed as a terrifying omen of doom. Instead, consider it a magnificent invitation. It beckons you to finally realize the staggering potential of mindful, elegantly timed actions within a universe that is fluid enough to be reshaped by them. The universe is not a cold, mechanical clock. It never has been. And frankly, that is the most spectacular, liberating news the scientific community has delivered in the last 300 years. If you crave this depth of exploration and this content resonates with your soul, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have so much more on the horizon that expands directly upon the foundations we've laid today. Thank you deeply for sharing your time and energy with me. To keep pushing the boundaries of this quantum adventure, tap on the video currently hovering on your screen. I will see you over there, right on the other side of the chaos.